On today's episode, we talked about euthanasia. For our listeners, this could be a triggering topic, so enter at your own risk. We will define euthanasia, talk about the legality towards it, and our own thoughts on it. So listen in.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about grief and mourning. Is it argumental or existential? What's it mean to me? Let's talk about death.
Hi, I'm Benny Capal, and I'm a funeral professional.
And I'm Nicholas Capal, a psychologist.
Hey, Nick, let's talk about death.
Let's do it.
Dr. Nick.
Hello, Benny boy.
We got a big one today. Woo-wee. It's hot. Yeah, I mean, it's heavy. This piece of paper is
Cremation?
extremely heavy.
Just ching.
Today we're going to talk about euthanasia. Me and you have talked a lot about this.
Yes, we have. This does spark a lot of my thoughts and imaginations. That's
It
for
sure does. No, so Doc Nick, give us kind of a synopsis of euthanasia in general. What are we looking at?
So for all the listeners out there, euthanasia is the process in which the physician or doctor will end someone's life by administering some sort of cocktail with the permission of the person who is dying and the family members. That's what euthanasia is.
Very good. And I just want to say for all the listeners, this is a very triggering topic. Dr. Nick and I are not judging right, wrong, indifferent. We are bringing up both sides. We might bring up a little bit of how we feel about it, but we are not saying one way or the other is wrong or right. We're just kind of bringing up our own thoughts on it. Right, Doc Nick?
Well, let's kind of look at it as a debate, because I think it's important. Even if you believe one way, it's important to hear the other side, because that's what honestly makes you more educated on the topic. And maybe it'll persuade you to change your mind. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll make you actually have a stronger opinion at the end of this. So
this is where my head is having a tricky part wrapping around. So hospice care, we've talked about that. Amazing what they do, the incredible what they do. And yet again, this is not right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just bringing up something to think about. So hospice literally comes into your home, or you go to a facility, and they basically make you as peaceful as possible.
Comfortable.
Comfortable. Thank you. That's the terminology. Make you as comfortable as possible by giving you more and more drugs, sometimes morphine, to eventually where it takes you out. It kills you.
Yeah.
Okay. How is that, in your opinion, in your professional opinion, any different than euthanasia?
So let's think about this, right? Let's backtrack a little bit. Still in hospice, there is, I'm guessing, maybe you know more about this than I do. Maybe I need to do some more research on this. But I'm guessing that a doctor is signing off on the Vicodin painkiller or morphine that is being administered, correct?
Absolutely. The hospice is nurses that come to the home, but they are always overlooked by doctors.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is there is no difference, right? It's just a longer process.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So
you get what I mean?
It's
still
not an
a doctor.
It's not an immediate process.
It's still a doctor prescribing. Maybe they're not physically administering it. Maybe the nurse is, right?
Okay.
But think of the difference, like a marathon versus a sprint, right?
Can we
So a sprint might be euthanasia. Like the doctor actually puts this cocktail together, and like, you know, a lot of our viewers probably have had to put down a pet and take them into the vet and hold them while they give them the cocktail, and it peacefully puts them to sleep, right? That's the idea.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yep.
That's euthanasia, right? We're just administering to a human being versus a pet.
Okay.
Right. The hospice, right? Let's look at that more of like a like I said, a marathon, right? It's slower, because it's not actually a dosage that's going to immediately kill you. It's a dosage that over time is going to kill you.
So would you say in the eyes of the nation, right? Because a lot of states do not allow euthanasia. So we're going to start with that. Would you say that hospice is looked at more as an ethically humane way to euthanize?
I mean, I think that's the whole idea of the comfortability, right?
Okay. Yep.
And again, I think when we're talking about euthanasia, I think it's really important to bring up the difference between ethical and moral.
That's why I said ethical. I did not say
Yeah.
moral.
No, for the viewers out there, because I think a lot of people kind of not misconstrue, but I think they rope those two together, and there is two different
Right, because we're not going to bring in religion to this, because obviously in some
definitions.
people's faith, we do not have the right to take life.
Well, I think that's that's number one problem, right? You bring up the idea of euthanasia, it immediately triggers a lot of people's morality.
Right.
And that's okay. That if you're listening out there and you're like, "Ooh, I don't like this topic," it's totally okay. It makes sense, right? It goes against a lot of religions.
Can I say it's important that this is such a topic that needs to be debated, right? This is important because this is huge. This is a very heavy, whether a state agrees or doesn't agree. This is a very heavy. It's finite, right? So once it's done, it's done. So that you can't go back. So the idea is, why I'm getting into this is
and here's the other flip of the coin, right? The idea at that point for someone to go on hospice, they are in the stage of dying. They are going to die.
Right.
So all this is doing is making it more comfortable. Now, is this exasperating the death? Is it making the death come quicker? Probably. Again, I'm not a let me just clarify for all the viewers out there. I am not a medical physician. I am a doctor of clinical psychology. Totally different fields.
Yeah, but let's go into that though. But that's not stipend the importance of what you do, because you were explaining to me, and go into this, the states that do allow euthanasia, you have to be signed off by one or two psychologists. Am I not mistaken?
So from you have to be the last time I read it, for a lot of the states that do accept it, is that you have to be signed off by two mental health professionals, and that's what they say. Mental health professionals.
Okay.
Does that
can that be counseling?
So I'm going to be honest with you. In my opinion, that's very concerning.
Ooh, because you can. Okay, yeah.
And I'm not saying that you need a psychologist. You don't need a doctorate. But what I am saying, what's concerning to me, is that I feel like it should be clarified as a specialized mental health professional, meaning that the person that should be signing off on this not only has been trained as a therapist or a counselor or a social worker, but they should have some sort of specialty in the field of grief and loss.
Hey, can I bring
because
that up?
it scares me that the wording says a mental health professional. So are we saying, again, this is me debating if this
Doc Nick being Doc Nick.
If this ever comes to Michigan, I'm going to have some issues, because if that's the way we're going to explain it, I'm a little concerned, because the thing is that I think there should be a lot of safeguards in this, because again, and I'm not even worried about the lawsuits towards my profession. I'm legitimately worried about these people are literally coming to these therapists and asking, am I sane of mind to end my own life?
Interesting.
That is the question, right? And that is what these two mental health professionals are doing. Is that they are basically making sure that you are in the sane enough mind to make this decision. So here's the other worry I have, right? When you stub your toe, and I'm comparing apples to bananas here, but I just want you to listen to me and follow me here. Mm-hmm. If you stub your toe, what is the first reaction?
Ouch.
Usually it's a lot worse than ouch. Right? You might cuss, you might
some curse words.
You're slinging your stuff, and that's because in the human condition, when we are in a lot of pain, we do things that we normally would not do, correct?
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. I'll find you.
So let's even spin this deeper. And this is just a thought. I'm not saying, again, this is just a thought I want everybody to think about.
Yep.
And this is why I think it's so important for these mental health professionals to be specialized.
Let's get the rabbit ears out.
Because basically what we're saying is let's say someone is dealing with cancer, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that that's going to be painful.
Yep.
Okay. When we're in that much pain, are we competent? This is the question I have to ask, because this is what a therapist has to figure out. Are we competent enough to make a final decision?
I don't know. Let me play the devil's advocate on this too. But flip that around. What kind of living is that where you're in that much pain?
I am not absolutely. I am not. Again, this is devil's advocate here. I get where
'Cause
you're coming
that's-
from, but what I'm saying to you is that is basically the role of those two mental health professionals
Right.
is to
Absolutely.
literally take into account their state of being and say this person is competent enough to end their own life.
And that brings up another thing, and I know this is way on and off topic, but I just want to yet again things that I think about in my profession. On the death certificate, if we were allowed in Michigan to put you died of euthanasia, right? I think that would be the technical term.
I have no idea how it would turn up in the.
That would be anybody out there that their state allows it on the death certificate. What do they actually put in those cases? Please write us back at letstalkaboutdeathpod@gmail.com. I'd be very interested in that. Why I'm getting at that is in some insurances, they won't accept certain deaths, right? They won't give the money out to beneficiaries for certain kinds of death, right? So do you think they would accept euthanasia if it was legally allowed?
Well, I think that's the reason why litigation is so tough is because it's not only, of course, right. There's money involved with health insurance and life insurance. I think the more important question that you're really asking is, again, is this a separation between church and state?
Well,
right.
yeah.
And the reality is that if it is legal in the state for euthanasia, then absolutely the insurance company should be held to that standard,
100%. It's just something to think about that most people wouldn't even.
But I think that's the reason why it's not in all states yet. I think it is coming. It's just I think it's a matter of time because the reality is I think a lot of states are basically taking a step back and going, wait, let's see how these states handle.
Right.
This.
Yeah, they're
Like, what
using it
comes
as a
up,
learning
right?
experience for sure.
And here's the ultimate, I think, most difficult thing for me. This is not a question that we can go back and study to see whether or not this was the right decision.
Right, because it's so finite. It's done.
Well, they're gone.
You can't. Yeah,
right?
You can't
They're
ask
dead.
them how was that experience.
So the worry becomes is, are we going to sign off on killing someone because that's really what we're doing at that point,
Absolutely.
right? And again, this is triggering conversation, and I apologize, but I think we need to say the right words here because the reason why I'm saying killing is because let's say this person was not in their right mind to make that decision,
Yep.
and we just pulled the plug.
Right. How would you know though? You wouldn't know. I want to go even
That's
further.
what I'm
here.
saying.
I want to
we
go
don't.
here to you as a professional, right? So let's say you become one of those that are professional enough to make that decision, right? So let's say you do it for so many years and then you have this existential crises where you're like, did I make the wrong move? And now we're already talking about burnout with psychologists, mental health professionals, counselors, et cetera, funeral directors. We're not out of that class by any means, form or shape, hospice workers, et cetera. Is that just one thing more to add to a burnout situation? These psychologists that are making these huge decisions, right? And then eventually maybe like have a total life changing feeling on that, right? And that's so finite. So now you're going back in this thought of did I do the right thing, right? Oh, and here's the other thing too. If you don't do it right, so Doc Nick, let's say you were like, I understand it's legal, but I personally don't feel comfortable doing it, so I'm getting out of this, right? Will you be stigmatized because you're not?
I truly believe if this comes to Michigan, I will definitely have to have some words with whoever's making this come to reality, because I think absolutely a therapist has the right to decline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if it's encroaching on their moral compass, just like church, like I said, separation of church and state. And I think, to be honest with you, I'd much rather have people say I'm not comfortable doing that than get forced into doing that and then making the wrong decision.
Well, and that's what I was going to go at. Do you think if it was legal, you could be court ordered to do it?
it's an interesting fact, because one of the things for psychologists is that if you are the only psychologist in, I forget what the actual law is. I should probably know this. I apologize to all the psychologists listening out there, but you pretty much are mandated to help them as best as you can.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Don't you, like doctors, make an oath like to do no harm? Right.
Right, but
That's
if
the idea.
you're taking on something that you are going to do harm in, then you're doing the wrong
Because
thing
whether
too.
you're harming them or yourself, you're harming one way or another, and that's an interesting thought.
Well, it's not. Wait, hold on. The oath is not to do no harm to ourselves,
You do no harm to others. So you
To
are the one
no harm.
administer, because
to others.
you're not the one pushing the button, but you signed off on it, right?
I mean, yeah.
You're part of that by omission, regardless, right?
Again,
I'm not talking about sins. I'm just talking about you are.
Again, we're bringing up this idea, this question of ethics versus morality. Ethically, if you are specialized in grief and loss, you are the right person to be making that decision. If
You would have to
trained.
do some soul searching, because
Yeah, so that's ethical, right? Moral, though, can I go to bed at night knowing that I basically said this person is okay to allow a doctor to kill them?
that's an interesting thought, because at the beginning of this podcast, you literally said, I would want to make sure that the people that are chosen for this are chosen right? And then you went into, I would be the one probably that would be best suited for that. So now you are in this existential crisis, because you are the one that should be doing it, but you don't want to do it.
And I think maybe that's what's going to make that the right person to do that is that I know what this is going to do. So maybe I'm actually more suited knowing that I don't want to do this to do it, because I'm going to making sure I'm crossing my T's and dotting my I's. I'm making sure this person is competent to make that decision, because I literally would rather say no. I'd much rather not do that.
That's so interesting. Well, and
Right.
and going to,
I mean, again, to all the listeners out there, I am to be honest and be very transparent. I am sitting on the teeter right now. I'm 50-50 whether I would want to do it or not want to do it. I just think that if we're going to do it in the state of Michigan, there really has to be some safeguards put into place, because there is a lot of things that I question, especially reading this idea that it just has to be two mental health professionals. Okay, are we talking about someone who just got out of school, that they're allowed to do that? And again, I'm not saying anything about brand new therapists out there. I am saying that I think we got to be careful with our verbiage or wordage when we're talking about someone's life, right? Are we going to put, so for example, are we going to put a brand new surgeon on the president of the United States? Right? We're not going to do that,
You're
right?
definitely going to have your T's crossed and your I's dotted. That's all you're saying, is make sure if this is going to get done, let's do it right? Let's do it right from the start.
Right.
Well, here's my question. And let's flip this. Let's flip the lens, right? So let's look at it from their perspective, the one that's dying, right? What if they want to end their life, but their family doesn't? How does that? Do you know enough about that? So let's say I'm really sick, Nick, and you personally don't want me to end my life, but it's my body, it's my life, right? That's the idea. I can choose to do this, and I choose to do it. Can you stop it?
Well, I think how it is though, right? If I find you're competent enough to make that decision, it doesn't matter what your family thinks.
Interesting, but I thought in the euthanasia thought the family has to be a part of it too.
The family has to accept it. I think that's written in there for someone who can't speak.
Ooh, okay. I got you.
You know
that
what
makes
I mean?
sense.
So they're still competent.
Well, that's it. Well, here's why I'm saying this, because we've had this talk on other platforms, and somebody has brought up, or at least I was on a platform that talked about it. Somebody brought up some countries have it, some countries don't, and it's actually legal for you to go to another country, do it, and then come back. Not that person, obviously, because they're not coming back. But if you're a family member and you're purposely going to, I'm sorry, I think heard this right. Switzerland you can legally euthanize in Switzerland.
Okay.
So this person, and I can't remember, I think they said the UK. They went from the UK, they heard of this family that went from the UK to Switzerland to kill their loved one, to end their life. And then when they got back, they were arrested.
I have no
Is that
idea.
interesting?
Well, I'm gonna
Is
be.
that,
I mean,
think
it's
about
super.
that.
It's super interesting. I have no idea the laws of other countries.
That's interesting. Well, look at even in states, right?
Yeah.
So let's say, do you know of any states for sure that euthanasia?
Colorado and Hawaii. I know
Okay,
those
so
two.
let's say
for a
Colorado,
fact.
right? So if I want to end my life, I could technically go to Colorado and do it. Would I be penalized
again,
being a Michigan resident?
Again, I don't know the law well enough in those states. I'm guessing that you have to be some sort of a. That's where your home is.
Anybody out there that knows how these are, if you're hearing these and you're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like I said, feel free to email us at letstalkaboutdeathpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear feedback on this. I'm sure we're gonna get a lot of emails on this one, Doc. But I think it's just an incredible topic. But I think we'll end it there. I think we're gonna leave another episode open for assisted suicide, because I think we could probably have multiple
Physician-assisted suicide.
physician-assisted suicide.
That is a different topic. Absolutely.
So Doc Nick, I think right now we'll put that on pause and we'll go into some Q&As.
I think it's time.
Q&A, everyone loves that Q&A.
Q&As, endless Q&As, popping in, dopping in, Q&A.
So here we go, Benny Boy Slim. You ready?
Let's do it.
So the topic is, why do we have to be buried or cremated? Here we go. I would much rather just be thrown into a jungle or the ocean and let the animals eat me. I don't like the idea of being locked in a box, buried underground, or burnt into ashes. I'm just wondering why death is handled with all the weird mortician stuff.
Yeah, we're their fault.
And is so controlled with what's allowed to happen to your.
Interesting. Well, I think a lot of the reasoning behind why we have to do certain things is protection of the environment, right? Because here's where we're at in today. For instance, right, you want to die and you want just to be thrown into a jungle. Is that basically what it said? So, and yet again, if you wrote this question out there, I'm not saying you're right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm trying to answer this in the best way that I can. Think of it this way: if your loved one just throws you into somebody else's property, that's not your property. The problem is today.
What if it was your property?
Okay, so you just want to be, well, let's talk about that. So there is a water stream underneath it so let's say you're on specific medications that have toxic doses, or are what am I thinking of? Radioactive material that's going into the ground system, which could possibly going into the sewer system, which could possibly going into the water. Doc Nick, I think we already talked about. They took tests on
the lakes
and they found
blood pressure.
Coumadin.
Yeah, blood pressure medicine.
So that's the
okay.
first
By
thing.
the way,
The
for
second
everybody
thing,
listening, it's a very, very, very minute.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
But they did find traces of blood pressure medicine in the lakes,
and
which
that's
is interesting.
so even if you don't take in the ground situation, now you're going to be, predators are going to go after you, right? So you got foxes, you got this. So what if they go into radioactive and they spread it to them, right? Now we might have a possible DNR situation because the environment of the local surrounding area may be infected by this.
Yep.
On top of this, basically, it comes down to is preservation of the dead too. So yes, we do live in a old school Christian nation. That's how we were founded, regardless of your feelings. I'm just saying how it is, where burial was the way that we do it. And it's interesting because I always like the saying, and I can't always remember who it is, but you can judge a society by the way they treat their dead. I 100% agree with that. And I think it's interesting because I do realize you don't have to now be buried or cremated. There's other ways that are coming out. There is ways that you can be turned into mulch. There is water. I always forget
whatever.
It's like hydrolysis, but it's water cremation basically. And there's other ways. But yes, it does seem like the two main ways are cremation or burial. I do see that, but now we're getting into more of a society on green burials, which is basically you are wrapped in a shawl or a wicker casket and you're put in the ground. depending on the cemetery of that, because some are legit green and others are like kind of a hybrid between burial and green. So you can look into that. The green burials are becoming a bigger and bigger thing, and that way you have a little more natural way of being having a disposition. There are different countries that have different rules, just like different states have different rules. Things are changing very fast, extremely fast within the last 100 years. So you might have different ways of disposition even in the next 10 to 20 years. So just do your research on that. Realize that the morticians are not the ones that put laws into place. We are not the ones that are telling people what to do. That is legal. So just make sure to to not blame your local morticians, because it can be tough sometimes, and I feel like we kind of get thrown into the barrel there. Doc Nick, how do you feel about that question?
You know, I think it's whatever way you want to leave your body. I mean, it's your body. Do what you want with it. But I think it's important also that we talk about, you know, as much as that you want to do that, as much as you want to be thrown into a jungle or a wooded area and left to basically be taken over by the environment, whether that is predators or just basically decompose and, you know, bugs and all that fun stuff. I think it's also important to ask your families how they feel about that, right? I think a lot of people, and I'm not trying to say we're narcissistic, but I do think that we forget about the survivors, like the people that loved you and want to have a place that they can go and visit you. And I could just think of the horrified people that would go to your place that you were thrown into, and they see a just a leg left because the predator took all the rest. You know what I mean? Like, I think that would even more traumatize someone. So again, even if this was allowed in your state or your neck of the woods,
In
ching,
your neck of woods.
I think that you really need to just, you know, just talk to your families about it.
Yeah, I think Doc Nick, when this comes down to it, it's just important to really just do your education on this. There are more than just burial and cremation, and there's other places that you can do it. And like I said, the future is bright, and it's moving at a very fast speed. So it would not surprise me if sooner or later there is more green, which is what you're saying, and being thrown in a jungle or ocean. So just look into that. With that, Doc Nick, I just want to say to our listeners, thank you so much, especially on today. It was a very, very tough subject. If you have thoughts or concerns, or maybe this triggered you, feel free to write us. We'd love to hear from you, or maybe we can help you at letstalkaboutdeathpod@gmail.com. We'll use these questions, or if you just want to be anonymous and just ask Doc Nick and I something, we'd love to help. This is why we're doing this. So please reach out to us. Tell us about your friends. Write those reviews.
Well, you just spread the news, right? Let people know that if they're looking, you know, or thinking about death or their funeral or whatever, you know, tell them to check out the podcast. It might be very beneficial for them.
Yeah, just keep spreading the word on death. I mean, that's just really what we're after. So, you know, Doc Nick, if you're not talking about death,
you sure ain't living. Have a great night, everybody.